This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. Today's big day in Florida. I guess. Who the hell knows? Supposed to be done with the machine recount.
But in Palm Beach, there's no machines because they all overheated and no one's there.
This tweet yesterday from Alex Seitz-Wald, NBC News. Picture of the empty facility. We're now 18 hours from a deadline they're supposedly rushing to meet, and there are 0 machines running, zero employees visible working on the floor, and no new info in hours. I just asked the supervisor for an update. She waved hand and walked away. It inspires a lot of confidence. That combined with, in addition to provisional ballot boxes being found in Avis rental cars earlier in the week, Bikers for Trump leader Chris Cox finding and dropping in front of crowds protesting at the Broward County Elections Office colored zip tie tags found on the ground near the building's loading dock. 15 red and orange tags were cut off ballot boxes before the votes reached the election office, is the allegation, which, if true, could be a violation of state law, could be evidence of voter tampering, or it could be nothing at all. We just don't know. That seems to be sort of the recurring refrain. We don't know what the hell is going on in Broward County.
No, well, regardless, Rick Scott was in Washington, D.C. yesterday. Saying hello, getting to know fellow senators.
And Sherrod Brown, the recently reelected Ohio senator, was at an Al Sharpton event. I could stop there, but I'll keep going. Projecting onto Republicans what's happening in Broward County by saying this.
We have seen if Stacey Abrams doesn't win in Georgia, they stole it. It's clear. It's clear. And I say that publicly, it's clear. What they're trying to do in Florida to the gubernatorial candidate and to the Senate candidate running for re-election.
Who's trying to do to who in Florida? This is the left's penchant to project onto others what they themselves are doing when it is unsavory. For more on Florida and Georgia and other matters, we're pleased to be joined by Dave Drucker, senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Good to be here.
So, Brenda Snipes, boy, such a performance that she has provided in this election that even Jeb Bush has felt compelled to weigh in and say she should be replaced. What is your handle on the state of affairs in Florida?
Well, look, my wife's an advisor to Rick Scott, so I've kind of stayed out of this. What I will say in terms of my reporting, what I'll say is that I think that what the courts decide are going to be a lot more important and relevant than what the laws are. Judges all over the country have shown an inclination to try and allow as many counting of ballots and if necessary, counting of ballots after initial deadlines as possible, under the rubric that people shouldn't be disenfranchised. So I don't know exactly what that's going to mean for the Florida case. I do know, in covering elections over the years, that when you're ahead by a substantial margin or, even, less than a substantial margin, it's rare that recounts and court decisions end up changing the results
right.
that after election day finish, unless there's some sort of real wacky mistake that was made. And that's usually how these things go. And so I think that's definitely what we're dealing with in Florida. I think in Georgia, it's a little bit more unclear because the margin that Brian Kemp is ahead by is particularly substantial. Yeah. And so, again, unless there were serious errors made, just flat-out errors, it's hard to see how he doesn't finish on top. And look, if you're we've seen politicians on both sides of the aisle here make all sorts of specious claims about, why things may or may not go their way. This is in the last week or so been true of Democrats and Republicans. And I think we're going to continue to see that because part of the battle with these recounts that we've seen over the years is not just legal. and actually, what the ballots are, but, the court of public opinion and trying to shape the narrative about who's actually winning and who's actually losing.
Well, right. I just wish that Sherrod Brown would be held to account for his fact-free allegation the way that the D.C. press corps obsesses about President Trump when he alleges things that he can't provide evidence to support. I mean, so, a standard that's applied across the board would be a nice change of pace.
Well, look, that's part of what you guys are doing. And I think that, as we saw, far back as 2000, when Republicans are active in trying to make their case, I think there is an impact on public opinion, and I think there can continue to be an impact on public opinion as long as people with an interest in this speak out.
Well, but then you have President Trump gave an interview yesterday to the Daily Caller, kind of fact-free claims about people switching hats and then going in to voting for a second time. Is there any evidence to support that kind of crazy claim?
Nope. And it sounds, look, the president tries to make outlandish, embellished claims to prove a general point. Mm-hmm. But this is one of his better ones. Let's put it that way. But there's just, also, look, whatever you think about, how local elections are run, and all of our elections are run locally, stuff like this just doesn't happen. Not on any large scale. Did one person somewhere in a country of 350 million people do it? Possibly. But, the same elections that swept Republicans into power in 2010 with a gain of 63 seats, that swept them into power in the Senate with a gain of 9 seats, that swept President Trump into power with a solid electoral college victory, is the same election that just swept. It's the same country with the same counties and election officials generally that just swept Democrats into power in the House. So these things, they're not bad just when they don't go your way, but they're fine when they do go your way. Our local election systems, state-run, county-run, tend to work pretty well. And, part of the history of the United States is that we don't like too much power centralized. And so that's one of the reasons why elections are locally run. And I think it tends to work pretty well.
Well, yeah, I agree generally with that statement, but there are exceptions to that rule, and Brenda Snipes is one of them. And that's, frankly, on Rick Scott in particular, for not relieving of her of her duty after the initial go-around where she was found to have acted in contravention to state law and ballot integrity. So, there are examples where people should be made an example of for the purposes of maintaining confidence in the local administration of elections.
Yeah, look, like I said, it's not a perfect system. The broader point I'm trying to make is that our elections tend to swing back and forth.
Yeah, I understand.
And I just tend to look at it as we've elected Democrats, we've elected Republicans. It tends to work pretty well overall.
I want to get your take on the insurgency within Democrat ranks in the House. Some dozen and a half members that say they're not going to vote for Pelosi, and the Congressional Black Caucus giving Tom Perez a no-confidence vote as the DNC chairman. A bunch of sound and fury signifying very little. Pelosi will be the speaker. Tom Perez is going to stay, or some real revolt afoot.
Well, look, I don't know that Tom Perez will stay or not. That's actually questionable. I think Pelosi is likely to be the speaker, but I think that the rebellion in the Democratic ranks of the House is real. I think there's a lot of restlessness. She's been at the top for 14 years, if I'm not mistaken. That is a long time for a caucus to be led by one person. It's rather unusual. It's a testament to how talented and powerful Pelosi is as a politician. But I think that a lot of Democrats ran on not supporting her for speaker. I think a lot of them intend to keep that promise. I think there are a lot of other Democrats that were reelected that are starting to get tired of her as leader. This tends to happen over time. There's just a restlessness, and so I wouldn't completely rule out the idea that she doesn't end up having the votes for the gavel, but it is likely. The DNC, look, I think the Democratic National Committee there's a lot of work to be done to clean it up, fix it, and have it work properly. So I don't know that Tom Perez is a shoo-in for another term. We don't even know that he wants another term.
Yeah.
Maybe they could replace Keith Ellison with Michael Avenatti as the deputy DNC director at least.
Too soon.
First,
That's really not.
for stability.
No.
For profile. No. Okay.
Back to the Speaker of the House, though. We had a rep on CNN last night. His name is, why am I having a mind blank? Oh, Seth Moulton. And he's suggesting that they need to have an African-American female as the Speaker of the House, and was recommending Marcia Fudge. Is there any traction on that?
Well, we'll have to see. Look, part of the problem with this Washington Pelosi is very few Democrats have done the work to win the votes. A caucus leadership position on Capitol Hill is not about who the grassroots want. It's not about, who the interest groups want or any of that. Who's raised money, who gets legislation passed, who has put members in a position to be successful, who knows how to protect members from the attack that might come. There are a few Democrats that might be in a position to do that. Marcia Fudge or anybody else is going to have to make the case that they can defend this majority, and it's going to have, going to be a very hard-fought election in 2020. And, that may be, I think that's Pelosi's biggest asset. There are very few people underneath her that have done the work that are in that position. I think that's a problem in general for Democrats because you want to have an expansive leadership team that can do what she does. And I think with a lot of the new blood that was elected, there's a lot of talent in that pool, and a lot of them will end up rising to the top. I just don't know whether it's Marcia Fudge or anybody else, if anybody's in a position to win the votes. But if there are enough votes to vote against Pelosi, somebody will rise.
You know who likes Fudge is J.B. Pritzker.
But
enough about that. On the other side, Republican Kevin McCarthy defeating Jim Jordan to be the House Minority Leader. What kind of caucus leader is Kevin McCarthy going to be? How aligned with Trump as compared to Paul Ryan? How much cohesion can he bring from a leadership position to the House Republican caucus?
Well, look, McCarthy has a better relationship with Trump than Paul Ryan did. But this is also a different dynamic because when you're the minority leader, your only job is to vote no. And it's all you really have to do. Mm-hmm. And because you have a president in the White House, it's going to be very easy to be aligned with President Trump. You're not going to have the same internal strife. The House Freedom Caucus now is not going to have very much power because Republicans can't pass anything in the House. And so instead of having a situation where you have a Republican majority that's trying to pass legislation and the Freedom Caucus wants it to be more conservative and they have the votes to block it, basically they don't have the votes to block anything because Republicans can't pass anything. So they're all going to be in league together now. It's going to be a much more Trump-friendly caucus. But by the same token, Democrats have all the power in the House. The Senate is going to be where Republicans can flex their muscles on Capitol Hill. And, that's where I think you're going to see a lot of action.
He is David Drucker, senior political correspondent for the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. David, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Anytime, guys. Thank you.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Connect with Dan and Amy on the AM 560 The Answer mobile app. Just text the word app to 64636 to download the app today.
The school year